Hi everyone, and this is another review slash overview video. This time I'm looking at Eureka Entertainment's limited edition UK Blu-ray release of the Jackie Chan starring film City Hunter. It's based on a popular Japanese manga series of the same name, and Jackie agreed to do the film to try and appeal more to his Japanese fans. And he actually plays Ryu Saber, the titular City Hunter. The Cantonese title, you can just about make out the Chinese characters behind where it says Jackie Chan City Hunter, albeit on its side is Sing Silip Yan, which I believe is a direct translation to City Hunter. So as with the other Eureka Entertainment limited edition Blu-rays that have been released here in the UK, this also has one of those cardboard sleeves, just like the others I've looked at. And on the back there's the usual plot outline and what's in this version. The film came out in 1993, as you can see there, directed by Wong Jing. Now, from what I can make out, Wong Jing and caused quite a bit of problems due to clashing with Jackie's usual style. Wong Jing's humour can be broad and sometimes quite a bit crude, whereas Jackie doesn't really like being like that. And in fact, when he agreed to do this film, that they actually played down the womanizing of that Ryu Saber does compared to how he's in the original source material, because Jackie's fans, it's very unlikely they would have accepted him playing a full-on pervert. So that got toned down quite a bit, so to make it more in line with a persona that Jackie's hardcore fans would find acceptable. That has both pleased and reviled fans of City Hunter in equal measure. So it's hard. So it's a bit of a mixed bag as to whether or not the change was well received. It seems to be pretty much split down the middle. But anyway, let's on the front cover there we can see Jackie, of course, and Australian martial arts actor Richard Norton, and Ching-Mi Yao, who was one of the leading ladies in the popular Naked Killer film. That's just Jackie again there, and there. On top of a car with no driver in it by the looks of things. Okay, off with the protective sleeve. Oops. Same cover art on the front of the Blu-ray case itself. And same sort of blurb on the back. Now let's take a look inside. As with a lot of these, you get a booklet with some information about the film and the usual cast and crew. Jackie, of course, and Joy Wong, you may remember her from A Chinese Ghost Story. Kumiko Goto, who had a very short career, but I mean at the time she was deemed to be an up-and-coming rising star, and then she met a French racing driver and they got married, and as was the tradition back then, she retired from the industry. Ching-Mi Yao, who I mentioned, she also got married and retired from the industry. Leon Lai, I don't think, as far as I know, I've not seen him in anything else apart from this. Richard Norton I've seen quite a few times. He he had a fight with Samo and with Jackie in Twinkle Twinkle Lucky Stars, and he also has a role as a villain in Millionaire's Express, aka Shanghai Express, which was another Samo directed and Samo starring film. Gary Daniels, British martial artist, never looked as good in a film as he does here, and he gets a great entry scene in the film. And I mean, the way he comes out of a box split in itself is impressive. Eric Cotton and Jan Lam, DJ Hard and DJ Soft, or I believe they've also been known as Soft and Hard Kids, Hard and Soft Kids, one or two, I can't quite remember. Written and directed by Wong Jing, whom I mentioned earlier. And contents page, some still there's Sing Silip Yan, and as ever a little bit blurb about how the film came to be and the events leading up to it and so forth, and some viewing notes and production credits. As with other similar releases, you get to see different posters on how the same film was marketed in other parts of the world. I wouldn't say this particular one had a reversible sleeve, as what's on the reverse side of the sleeve, as you can see there, is just a still from the film during the skateboard scene fairly early on in the film, shortly after Jackie's character meets the Kumiko Goto lead character in the film. Speaking of the film, whether or not you'll enjoy it will quite often depend on whether you like some fairly saucy humour in which women get somewhat objectified by the central character. Admittedly, not as much as in the original source material, but it particularly in the current times, that kind of thing might be seen as a bit misogynistic. But if you can put that aside and accept that it is very much a product of its time, then you'll still find some amusing slapstick moments to treat you to give you a fair bit of entertainment. There are two scenes in my mind that are worth checking out alone. One is that there's one bit where Jackie is in a cruise ship onboard cinema, and on the screen they're playing the fight between Bruce Lee and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar from the 1978 film Game of Death. And there's a point where Jackie's character is taking on two gigantic enemies, and bearing in mind that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar towered over Bruce, it's one of those where Jackie finds himself on the receiving end, but tries to actually get the on-screen fight from Game of Death to help him and give some tips as to how to beat his own opponents. And the other scene that's definitely worth a look is the scene oh goodness, the scene that basically takes off the Street Fighter 2 video game that was so popular at the time of the film coming out. Well, it starts off with a fight between Jackie Chan and Gary Daniels, and Jackie's character gets thrown into the arcade machine, gets an electric shock and starts to hallucinate, and he starts to see both both himself and Gary Daniels as well as the two kids that were also in the room at the same time, as characters from Street Fighter 2. I mean, when I first saw that scene, I was just howling with laughter because it's so clever and so amusing. In fact, that short scene itself is better than the whole of the official Hollywood Street Fighter film that starred Van Damme and Raul Julia, which came out in 1994. There are still some other. In fact, if you look there, there's actually a brief shot from that Street Fighter 2 scene I just mentioned. There's still plenty of other amusing bits in it besides those two. I mean, the action and stunts are still really up to the usual standard. I mean, Jackie himself isn't a huge fan of this film, not only because of him clashing with Wong Jing, but also he wasn't that keen on the slapstick. However, this film is still definitely worth a look, and while it's not one of Jackie's best, it's nowhere near his worst. And there's still plenty to enjoy about it. So you might be wondering, why did Jackie decide to work with Wong Jing? Well, the problem was, not long before production on City Hunter started, he had just directed himself in the film Armor of God 2 Operation Condor, which cost a whopping $15 million US, which doesn't sound like much for a Hollywood budget of that time, but for that equivalent in Hong Kong budget money, that was pretty high indeed, the most expensive at the time. So Golden Harvest just said, Jackie, you really can't take this long on one film anymore, and you keep going over budget. So it would be quite some time before Jackie could really get behind the camera to that level again. But yeah, I think City Hunter is still worth a look despite its obvious flaws. Anyway, this brings this overview/review to a close. Texie88 out.